Welcome to the Always On podcast. I'm your host, Duncan MacPherson. And on this podcast, our objective is to empower and enable our audience, which are very high caliber fee-for-service professionals, to always be working on their business and on themselves personally and professionally. And to that end, in today's podcast, I had a very in-depth conversation with Dr. Karen Weisgerber. Karen is the principal consultant at Cambion Consulting Group. She's part of the faculty of the Institute for Preparing Heirs. And we discussed one of the most significant unmet needs that exists with affluent families, especially first-generation self-made affluent families. And that is the concept of preparing their heirs. And we got into it. We talked about how to develop this into your process, how to position it properly with clients so they feel compelled to take action, and even covered a little bit on how to consider this for yourself in terms of continuity and succession and family investment legacy. So hopefully you enjoy it. And if you do, please share and tell your colleagues. And of course, if you have any ideas for topics you'd like to hear down the road, just let us know. Thanks for listening. One of the most significant unmet needs with affluent families, especially first-generation self-made affluent families who created wealth themselves, is in the area of preparing their heirs, continuity, succession, family investment legacy, and all of those dynamics. And of course, that creates a very significant opportunity for a financial professional. And to address this, I've got a special guest who's going to help me dive into three distinct areas. First, how to develop this as part of your overarching deliverable and process. Number two, how to position this effectively with your clients. And then thirdly, some considerations that might apply to your own life and your own business. It's interesting. I ask advisors on a regular basis, do you ever have clients asking you what happens to them if you retire? Or they ask you, when is your retirement window? These are very telling indications of what's on their mind. So, very fortunate to have a special guest, Dr. Karen Weisgerber, who has 30 years working with wealth creators and inheritors. She is on the faculty of the Institute for Preparing Heirs. She's done extensive research. She is a thought leader and definitely a subject matter expert in the areas of wealth and wealth transfer, philanthropy, and many other things, as you'll see soon. She's also a very deep thinker. In addition to her PhD, she has a postdoctoral fellowship in the area of neuropsychology in affiliation with Harvard University. Karen, that's probably one of the most impressive resumes I've ever seen. Thank you for being here, first of all. And secondly, was that intentional from the beginning, or did it develop as you got rolling?
Oh, this area of focus in my concept, no, it definitely developed as I got rolling. Yeah, my clients led the way.
Okay. With that, let's just dive right in to item number one, just the deliverable.
Sure.
And I thought the best way to do this is just to walk through W5, just to hit on some of the really salient points. The first thing I just want to remind advisors is, I know you care, and I know you're paying attention to your clients' evolving needs, but I want you to really build this in to your process and not make this intention driven because you're a good person. Like, really build this in to your reputational equity and your intellectual property as a personal and family CFO, right? The complete family office. So with that, Karen, and I'm really looking forward to this. First of all, let's talk about the what. What specifically is the unmet need that you help financial professionals address?
Sure. I would say the unmet need really is them connecting with their clients around this aspect of what is really on their client's mind, which is how this wealth is going to live well into their beneficiaries, particularly their next generation, their children's lives. So the what is that this is a significant concern. And we know this in part from research that's been done, but one of the most interesting pieces of research was an open-ended question Boston College, the Center on Wealth and Philanthropy, sent out to 75 families with over $25 million. Open-ended question, what was the most important thing to them regarding their wealth? And of course, coming from the Center on Wealth and Philanthropy, they were expecting to hear things like, I'd like to cure cancer or solve malnutrition or whatever. And nearly universally, the responses were, the most important thing to me is to be a good parent, and I am worried that this money is going to get in the way. So they're a bit lost in terms of how to navigate passing on wealth in a way. They're concerned about demotivating their children. They're concerned about entitlement. And they don't really have a lot of information or tools, if you will, for helping this to go well. And a lot of times they'll look to their advisor and wonder, and the advisors aren't necessarily themselves equipped with answers that help meet that unmet need.
Okay. And I'm assuming that just the demographic shifts that are occurring is just accelerating and amplifying all of.
Sure. The amount of wealth that is in motion currently, it's ballooned significantly in the last 20 years. And so there's a significant amount of money in motion, a significant amount of wealth being created, as we alluded to in the beginning of our conversation. And particularly for people who have created wealth, they don't have a roadmap for this. They didn't grow up with it. They don't quite know what to do being born into wealth. One of the analogies is there's like an immigrant family. They've just relocated to the area of wealth, but their children are born natives. And that's a real tension of how do you navigate a world that your children are born into that you are not familiar with.
Interesting analogy. And financial advisors more than ever wear a lot of hats, especially in these last 5 years. And again, especially with the clients that are that proverbial 25 or 30-year overnight success story. They didn't really come from much necessarily, and they aspired maybe to being financially independent, but for many clients, it was even more significant than they thought it would ever become.
Right.
But okay, so let's shift to the why. So why is this such a significant unmet need? Like, why do so many people kick this can down the road, including financial advisors? Sure.
I think my conclusion on that is that it's anxiety and fear, that people are concerned that their kids or their beneficiaries, if they're not directly their children, are going to be ruined by too much wealth, and they get anxious. And then the advisor gets anxious because they don't want to do the wrong thing or give the wrong advice. They don't really themselves have a roadmap. And that produces, I think, a significant amount of anxiety in the conversations, so that you've got two scared people looking at each other in the room, not quite knowing how to answer this in a way that's really helpful to the family and to the beneficiaries.
As I've gotten to know you and your colleagues at the Institute for Preparing Heirs, I've come to this realization that you are in a very powerful sweet spot, for lack of a better term, between the technical ability and the firmness, but also the bedside manner. Like, you're very respectful of the reality as to why this is an unmet need and how big it is and why there are anxieties. But you've also bookended that with a very methodical, proven approach. So I really want to get into that.
Sure.
It's an interesting dynamic. I mean, demystifying it for the advisor so that they have the confidence to be proactive and predictive with a process.
Right.
Not just having good intentions because they're good people, and then just helping a client get their head around it and realizing that, yes, it is big, it is significant, there are unintended consequences, and we see them in the media, often in the world of professional sports or entertainment, where the numbers are big and the collateral damage is significant. So let's shift now to the addressable audience. And you've got so many profound insights on this. So it's self-evident. Financial advisors got clients who are affluent or approaching an inflection point, a liquidity event. let's talk specifically about that. And I want to get into your perspective on the next generation as well, but I'll let you run with this.
Sure. In terms of what to do, and if you could form your question a little, go ahead.
Yeah. So let's talk about who in the W5, who is the addressable audience? And it's self-evident, but the clients specifically, but I also want to get your perspective on something I didn't think about, and that is treating the next generation as a prospective client and part of the addressable audience.
Absolutely. And I will say an interesting point in my work is I will often have the younger generations are the ones who are coming to me saying, can you help our family with this? My parents are frozen. They're not talking to us about the money. They're not talking to us about what we need to do to be ready ourselves. And we don't have enough conversations. And they might ask us, for example, to participate in the family foundation. So we're talking about giving away millions of dollars, but we've never talked about what it's like to have $1 million. So we haven't had the baseline conversations that equip us to do this well. So I think the who really is any family. And let me parse this out a little bit. The who is also the advisor. The who is also giving the advisors the tools so that they can have these conversations and feel confident. As an advisor, they don't typically want to start a conversation that they're not equipped to, at least, if not answer themselves, to give a resource to the client. So part of it is the who is equipping the advisors, but then the who, and I would say any family in the high net worth to ultra high net worth area, this is on their mind, and the parents are concerned. And in equipping them to have these conversations and do this work with their children, the children are better capacitated to do well. And they're interested then in working with the advisor. And quite frankly, from the advisor's point of view, that's a business, just because you're really cultivating a new generation of clients that when this is done right, they really want to work with you because you help them with their future generations. So I think the who goes across the whole spectrum there.
Okay, so that is counterintuitive. I would have never guessed that you actually have the second generation coming to you saying that this is something that my parents have been avoiding, something we know has to be addressed.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming they're not coming at it from an opportunistic perspective. They're thinking we need to get this done. This is going to cause some serious grief.
Absolutely. We don't want to have conflicts coming into our generation. We want to know, and we also want to know what our parents want for us. This is their legacy too, obviously. And so we want to know what's really on their minds, how we can fulfill their hopes and expectations, but we also want to be prepared because this could knock us off our track if we don't do it right. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm a parent. I've got two young adult sons, and I love the mentor protege dynamic. And I love the fact that they catch up. And one little example I've been telling my kids forever, if you're not early, you're late.
Mm-hmm.
Like for as long as I can remember, I've been saying that to them. And one of them not too long ago came back to me and said, hey, if you're not early, you're late. And from the perspective that it was his idea, but I just love it because it means they're obviously thinking for themselves and thinking more panoramically. And it's just very fulfilling as a parent. Okay. Sure. One thing I've been saying to advisors forever, based on the next gen opportunities and realities and unmet needs, is that to dig your well before you're thirsty, like get out in front of this, be proactive, building it as part of your process. But you said something to me the other day, develop a relationship with the next generation before they firmly develop a relationship with a financial advisor themselves. That was a very profound insight.
Right. Because sometimes these transfers don't happen until the next generation's in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. And by that point, most of the time they've already found their own person that they're going to be working with. So I think you could really turn that on its head and start that relationship very early with that next generation. It's a lot of things the advisors can do to begin to build that relationship, whether it's teaching financial literacy and fluency, mentoring, working with on some of the charitable giving aspects, helping them with managing their own smaller accounts, thinking about budgeting and planning. There's just so many ways the advisor can begin to be in that kind of mentor and advising role with the rising generation before they really, and quite frankly, it's a lot of work up front for the advisor. It's great if you have a team and you could work as a group together on this. But in any way, developing that deep relationship with that rising generation before they have all of those resources, chances are you're going to be the one who's going to be working with them then after that actual transfer takes place. And one thing I say to advisors is I encourage them to start talking about next generation transfers with families with kids as young as elementary school, that it's never too early to begin these conversations, to really help parents think about how can this money be a good influence? When do we start talking about, when do we acknowledge to our children that we have more than other people? How do we talk with them about making sense out of that? How do we talk with them about giving? And how do we talk with them about decision making on spending? Because chances are it's not going to be what you can afford. It's going to be where your values guide you. And all of those things become really important foundations for when wealth begins to transfer.
Okay, nice segue into the when, where, and the how. I think it's got to be part of the tipping point from an advisor's perspective to get themselves to a place where they feel they are legitimately doing a client a disservice by not proactively building this out and bringing it to them as a deliverable, both from a practical fiduciary perspective, but also from a personal and professional fulfillment perspective and the purpose and the calling.
If this podcast resonates with you, then you're likely the kind of advisor who strives to be indispensable to high net worth families. In partnership with Pareto Systems and the Institute for Preparing Heirs, we're offering exclusive live training to become the most trusted advisor for high net worth families. The Great Wealth Transfer Program equips you with the training and tools to secure and enhance multi-generational relationships. It's about becoming not just an advisor, but the most trusted advisor. Join us for the live training. Visit paretosystems.com/IPH to learn more and register today. Info can also be found in the description of this podcast. Again, that's paretosystems.com/IPH. Position yourself as the trusted advisor for generations to come.
I love your view on just how a family can get around honoring the affluence that they earned based on merit, and also the responsibility of that and the opportunities for charitable giving and benevolence and all of these different parts. Okay, so let's talk about the when and then where and then how. When you talk about elementary school, it makes sense. And there are books written for children on putting money to work and pay yourself first and some of these fundamentals. If you could expand on that would be great. And then we'll just build on the where and the how.
Sure. I start even earlier than that with kids know how to think about resources. They understand, but think about your kids growing up. I don't know what they were playing with when they were younger, whether it's Pokemon cards or Minecraft or whatever, but they learn that you take certain actions, you build up a certain amount of points. That can let me do something. I have this Pokemon card and you have that one, and I think yours is more valuable than mine. So I'm going to give you 2 of these for 1 of yours. They're starting understanding how to use, exchange, consider value in resources well before they're talking about money. And so I think whether it's even in elementary school, there's a lot of education. My kids were saying to me, turn off the faucet when you're brushing your teeth. You're wasting water. They learn very early on. So you take those lessons that they're already learning about resources, and you can talk about all kinds of transferable concepts with money, whether it's saving, spending, sharing. Sure. You can also talk about values-based decision making. Why is that one card worth more to you? Do you really want to trade these 2? How are you assessing that value? Because again, kids in the high net worth and ultra high net worth families ultimately are not going to be making decisions based on what they can afford. They're really going to need to be making decisions on values-based planning. And so starting all of that early, then it's transferable to money, but you've already built such a strong foundation for thinking about it and doing it. Yeah.
Karen, I remember the first time I saw a toddler grab an iPad and intuitively, obviously they watched their parents using this item, but I could see the wheels turning is the toddler scanning the iPad, and just these fundamentals, pay yourself first, the whole premise of delayed gratification. Did you ever read that study? And I think it might have been Harvard, was talking about, I think it was called the
marshmallow study. Sure. Yeah.
Just fascinating on the mindset of delayed gratification and understanding where the origins of planning for the future begin. Is there an opportunity? I think it's obvious that a financial professional can actually mash some of this research and information together using AI to create some thought leadership themselves to get their parents thinking early about instilling sound financial disciplines with their kids.
Sure. And I would say that the Institute for Preparing Heirs, which is going to be working with Pareto, there are also some tools they have for helping people grow into what we call responsible thinking about money and resources. And also you're talking about what we think of as more advanced concepts like compounding, delayed gratification, and so forth. And again, starting with the resources that they're using, kids do learn how to delay gratification, because they understand that something else that they're waiting for is more valuable. So that if you can start that early on, when you start talking about money and saving up for something that you really want and the importance of being able to do that, they again already have the brick and mortar foundation is set so they can do that with money because they've done it with so many other things. Like
I remember the look in my one son's eyes when I said to him, your goal is to get to a point where your money makes more money than you do. I could see it in his eyes.
Yep.
And that seed was planted. And I'm not saying that alone impacted his thought process and patterns, but I think it definitely left a mark. Okay.
And it opens up a really different way to think about money. It opens up money as work. It's not something to just spend. It's doing something for you. You really begin to develop a different relationship to it.
Right. And in the bigger picture, we've seen examples and warnings with families where the affluence can serve you or hurt you, depending on the degree that you address this proactively. Okay, so let's go to the where, and then I want to get into the how, because that's some nuts and bolts here. And what I want to talk about with the where especially is just being methodical about engaging strategic partners. Because obviously there's other fee-for-service professionals that can be engaged into this deliverable with the advisor, but you like to think of the advisor as being the quarterback. And I love that. What's interesting, last week I talked to an advisor who was talking about what he referred to as centers of influence. And that's jargon in the industry. And I said, and this is semantics for some people, but I just said, if you had a client listening into that and you were referring to an attorney as a center of influence, that kind of implies that you have this relationship with this person just to generate referrals. I'd much rather you professionalize this as you developing a vast network of other professionals that you're engaging into your process. And VAST is an acronym. VAST is value-added support team. So to be perceived and positioned as the quarterback or the CFO, the complete family office, the words matter and the way that you engage these professionals, because a lot of these other professionals are not entrepreneurial. They're very strong technically with their core competency, but in terms of relationship management and things like this, that's not necessarily their forte. So could I get a few insights, if you don't mind, on how you think of that and how you engage these strategic partners?
Sure. I think that concept of the quarterback in my mind is really a resonant one because I think all of these other players are critically important. The estate is not going to transfer if you don't have an estate plan, if you haven't thought about your tax planning, if you're not, there's philanthropic advising that becomes important strategically for the work that you're doing. So all of those things are important components. But if they're not integrated, you're losing a significant opportunity to not integrate them and work as a team and to present a sort of coherent, connected approach to the family. And you being the one who really is coordinating that, it reinforces your role as the trusted advisor. And quite frankly, when I talk to families, their financial advisors are the ones they're talking to the most. They talk to more frequently than for example, the estate attorney. Perhaps they're talking to the financial or the planner. They'll talk to them a few times a year, maybe, or sometimes annually. But typically, the financial advisor is the one they're talking to on a more regular basis. They've got really a better sense of where their areas of concern are, where their areas of hope are, what they're trying to accomplish. And they really are in, I think, a unique role to knit this team together and to present a strong front for the family. And again, when you start integrating with that next generation, you want to have these players lined up working, really have a sort of well-oiled machine that you're moving ahead with, so that again, you are in that role of the coordinator and the trusted advisor, keeping this thing going to meet the needs of the family.
But I think a lot of these other professionals are still somewhat transactional, right? They're trading
Right.
time for money based on the value they bring. Fair enough. But the advisor, especially if they're from an advisory perspective, this is a way to amplify their fee worthiness as they grow up
Right.
market is to be that quarterback. Okay. You have some excellent insights on the family meeting. Can we get into the weeds there?
Sure. There's so many kinds of family meetings. So I think one thing in stepping into the weeds, I try to just demystify what a family meeting even is. Because sometimes you hear the term family meeting and the family thinks we're going to call a family meeting and thinks everyone's getting called to the principal's office, like something's gone wrong. So instead, you have family meetings every holiday. You have family meetings at dinner. You have family meetings. If there's religious practices, there's so many times we really have family meetings. We're just not calling them that. So again, part of it is helping to move the family a little bit away of a place of anxiety. And this is already well in your wheelhouse. It's just the content that you're trying to figure out how you're going to present and maybe some sort of a format. So for some people, a family meeting might be an advisor-led process where there really is important information and learning being shared and really thinking about who's going to be at that meeting. Other times it's really for the family thinking, where do we want to go with this? What are our values with these resources? Where do we want to put them? How do we want to think about them in our family's life, in the life of the world? So there's so many different content areas that can go into a family meeting. I think developing it as an almost regular practice demystifies it and it makes it so much more accessible. And then when it's in place, you can plug in these other sort of critical information pieces that help build that capacity in the beneficiaries as they grow older.
Yeah, that's terrific. And again, to your point earlier about the Institute for Preparing Heirs, so many resources just to demystify it. I love part of our core. I love the positioning of always have an agenda and just demonstrate that there's no hidden agenda. This is not an opportunistic sort of hunter-gatherer. I eat what I kill. I'm looking for more business. This is me being proactive, addressing unmet needs, and solving them. Because I'm curious, do many clients want to be involved in this process, or are they somewhat passive? They just want the advisor to get it done. I trust you. Just take care of this. Check this box for me. Is there any research on that where most families are?
I'm not sure if there's research on it. I can say just from my experience, I think that many families want to be resourced. They want to know, but they do want to, I don't think they necessarily, I would say most families don't want to just hand it over because again, part of what they're sharing is their legacy, their values, their hard work. This isn't just money in an account. This is somebody's blood, sweat, and tears that got us here, or their visionary thinking or something. And they want that to all be part of the package in a way. So I think more often than not, the family does want to be involved, but they might, for example, hand off it. There's some of the concrete technical financial education, for example. They might want to be happy to hand that to the advisors to meet with the rising generation and build some capacity there. But as far as the family meetings itself, I think that very often the matriarch and patriarch in your classic family structure would want to be part of it and part of the planning, but they are often very happy to be informed by the advisor. What's a good first step to take in a family meeting over a course of a period of some years? What are some content areas that we're going to want to cover? Given you're very particular, the advisor has the opportunity to tailor these to the very particular specifics of this family, using something like a family tree, for example, which is part of the materials, to really think about what are the rising generations' needs? What are their age? What are some inflection points we see coming down the road? How do we build capacity? And what then would be the content for the family meeting that we're going to have? And I think you'll see in the materials from the Institute, it can start with just the most basic of family meetings of meet the team. If this transition were to happen tomorrow, the God forbid the bus scenario, if you were to, the bus were to meet you in the middle of the road and this transition happened tomorrow, are your kids prepared? Typically the answer is no. And so what would need to be done? And the templates for the family meetings can give some real agendas for how you would walk through different kind of content areas and getting everybody ready for the ultimate time when the transfers are going to be taking place.
Again, just getting into sort of the technical, I'm sure as the client, like seeing it through the client's lens, They want the advisor to be forthright, to demystify, okay, we've got a track. We're not going to wing it or make it up as we go. And they want a future pace. Here's the path we're going down. And then mile markers on the progression. Here's where we are. And I think if the advisor can articulate and verbalize that, the client can internalize it and probably socialize it to others in the form of advocacy, because a lot of these people associate with people like themselves. So
Sure.
there's probably a multiplier in there if the advisor builds it out properly and can. And here's the other thing I wanted to convey there is that there's a balance of sort of vapor and paper. Vapor is the words and the digital communication, emails and meetings like this. The vapor is the client-facing tools. We want all those built out. So the Institute for Preparing Heirs, if somebody becomes a member of that, consuming that information, are they provided with how to position the words matter? And then here are the tools and templates you can actually deploy. Is that all part of the mix?
Oh, sure. Starting with, there's a basic sort of 10-point checklist of things every family should consider as they're like looking at doing wealth transfers, and are you prepared for it? And depending on where you are in that checklist, some things you may have already taken care of, some things you haven't even yet thought of. Then behind each one of those are steps to help your family get ready and prepare. So yeah, it's fairly well articulated in terms of, and again, you look at your family, my kids, let's say, for example, you're seeing me with a family, their kids are in their mid-20s, you're expecting certain transfers to happen at certain periods of time down the road. Looking at that kid and that capacity, what are the needs going to be and what are the tools for meeting those needs by the time the transition happens? So it really does become a pretty planful and supported conversation and guidelines for getting people to where they want to be.
And can this be branded for the advisors, like an extension of, like a line extension of their practice and process if they adopt this?
Sure. Yeah. The Institute will co-brand with anyone who gets the materials, the licensed materials. And so the Institute has its name on it. And then the advisor, whatever firm they're with, can co-brand and then all of the materials. And it can come obviously directly from the advisor. And there's ways you can sequence it going out to families. So there's a logical progression of where you're starting, where you're going to end up. And so the family's equipped over time. So I think it can be a nice deliverable on the part of the advisor because the family really feels like they're getting something very concrete and helpful.
And there's probably a nice sweet spot there too, where there's the credibility of the brand within a brand, but it doesn't feel like an outsource where the advisor's just checking a box, that they're actually driving this down.
They're connected to it.
That's fantastic. For people listening, I'm going to share for you some calls to action on the Institute for Preparing Heirs and potential next steps in a moment. I am curious, Karen, I've got 3 books that I personally really, as a dad and as a coach, because I'm a business owner. One of them is Entitlemania by Richard Watts, very thoughtful book on basically it's how to prevent entitlement from seeping in and what to do if it's already seeped in. Some really neat stories and some actionables there. Entitlemania. Another is Beer Money by the Stroh. It's a window into the Stroh family and the dysfunction of affluence and that collateral damage in the family. It's heavy, but it's interesting. And another one is called Every Family's Business by Tom Deans, which of course is written specifically for self-made business owners. But again, how to have the conversation. So I'm bringing those up because at a minimum, with AI, you can literally ask, like ChatGPT, you can say, give me a 5-point summary of Entitlemania, give me a 5-point summary of Beer Money, give me a 5-point summary of Every Family's Business by Tom Deans. You can then mash those summaries together and then have the advisor give their own nuance and perspective, and then have this white paper. And you can be fully transparent and say, I've sourced this information and researched using artificial intelligence and my own experiential learning. But this is a document I wanted to put in the hands of my clients just to get them starting to think about this exercise. I'm mentioning that because I'm wondering if there are any books that you really like that you feel are indispensable to a financial advisor to support their knowledge base on this.
There are. I have a list I tend to refer to as, which isn't in front of me at the moment, but a couple of things that pop to mind. One is called the cycle of the gift. So the ones that I'm talking about are going to have a different bent almost, because they're not just focusing on money per se, but it's really broadening out the concept of family wealth to be legacy, education, experience, values, right? And so the cycle of the gift, I believe the first author on that is Keith Whitaker, also Jay Hughes and Susan Macenzia. And it talks about how they also have they have a series of books. Another one is called Total Family Wealth. And they have a series of books really thinking about how we talk about wealth, how we pass it on, how we do it with the spirit. So it's not just transactional, here's $1, but it's got that sense of legacy, importance, values. So they really root deeply into that kind of work. They also have another one called The Voice of the Rising Generation. So they really take a comprehensive view about wealth transfers that I think can be very helpful as a counterpoint to this sort of more, as you're talking about, the experiential, tactical ones that you're mentioning. I also really like books like Drive by Daniel Pink about motivation. I think sometimes people worry a lot about money dampening motivation. And I think it's good for parents to potentially take a moment to get, as you said, you could source it up through ChatGPT or whatever to get the salient points, but to really understand motivation so that you're not so tied up, worried about dampening it. You really have a better sense of what facilitates it. Because I will always say, money alone does not dampen motivation. I love to do a little quiz. If you ask, but I'll come up, I always run different names. Buddha, Thomas Jefferson, Taylor Swift. What are they all? Eli Manning. What do they all have in common? They're all born rich. They didn't have to work. But here we see the world leader for a whole religious movement. We see founder of our country and the Constitution. We see the Eras Tour, the first female self-made billionaire in music. Didn't have to do it. Didn't have to get off the couch, but they did. And so I think a question we have, I think that it's important for parents to think about is, how do we fuel motivation? If you take your mind away from the worry, which freezes us, and when you're anxious, you don't make good decisions. And a lot of these decisions get made when parents are anxious or they get frozen and don't make a decision. But if you start looking at the aspirational side of it and really think about, okay, how can this be a fuel? So I think reading things on motivation and entitlement, I also think trying to understand what fuels entitlement and what doesn't, really helpful as parents think forward about this.
Oh, you covered a lot of ground there. And I'm definitely the two that really got my attention, The Cycle of the Gift and The Drive by Daniel Pink. I'm going to look those up. And the cool thing about getting a summary from chat is it's not a promotional summary. It's the most digitally highlighted points of the book. Yeah, exactly. That AI has seen and noticed that people really, so it gives you a really great window. And then you can decide, of course, if you want to take the deep dive. But it's so funny. And there's such a spectrum of outcomes. I remember one of my kids wasn't quite certain as to what he wanted to do when he was a grown-up. And I just happened to say to him, I said, why don't you just come work with me, part of the family business? And he said to me, Dad, pretty much everything would have to go wrong for me to consider doing it. And I go, how about your plan B? And he goes, no, probably plan Q. Like, it's pretty far down the list. And he's trying to be respectful, but it wasn't his calling. Unfortunately, he's landed into something that it is, as he would say, my jam. This is perfect. But as a parent, you want to see that drive. You want to see the self-motivation. We're raising them to let them go. We can't want anything more than they do. These are really important insights. And not too long ago, I was at a ATM. I had to get some cash. Karen, it was yeah, exactly. But it was so bizarre because I couldn't help but notice at the station beside me was a sweet older lady and her disheveled son instructing her on how to take out cash. And I don't know the backstory. I don't know what was going on. It just didn't feel right. And my heart was breaking because who knows what was actually going on, but I just jumped to my own conclusions. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, it's such a noble calling for a financial professional to help a family get all of this right. And I think these families, they've got so much going on. There's so much noise. They just crave structure, professionalism, and good intentions that come from a just undeniable moral compass. A financial professional that can position all of that is just going to be respected. Okay, we can keep going. I know we've got other things. Everybody listening in, here's your call to action. You can do one of two things. You can raise your hand and say you'd like additional information. We have some follow-up podcasts and webinars coming up over the coming months. If you'd like to get on a very specific subscribe list to receive this, I know everybody takes this in their own way very seriously, but if you want to build this into your process and level up, this is an absolutely essential place to do that. And if you'd like to have a conversation about what it looks like to engage in the process that the Institute for Preparing Heirs has developed, and I know financial professionals who have, and proverbial game changer, both in terms of their confidence, the energy, but also the credibility when they have a conversation with their clients about this, and just leveraging from the credibility of the Institute for Preparing Heirs. So if you'd like to have a conversation with us, we'll make that available. You can just go to our website, Pareto Systems, schedule a call, and we can walk you through that and set some expectations in terms of what it would look like to professionalize this as part of your process. The stage of readiness now and over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, we all know that's a big number. And there's a T involved in terms of how much money is changing hands. So don't let any of this fall through the crack. Level up. So at a minimum, subscribe to our stream of information over the coming months. Have a conversation with us so we can help you understand the merit of actually adding this into your repertoire. And Karen, I'll let you have the closing words. I just want to say thank you very much. This has been terrific.
Sure. I think the closing words are, roll up your sleeves, get into it. It is one of the most important things on your client's mind, one of the most important unmet needs. And I will tell you, as I think any parent knows, when someone has their eyes on your children and their well-being, you care for that person. It enhances your relationship with that person tremendously. And so it is a service, as you said, it's a calling really to really help families navigate this well, and it will serve your clients and it will serve you and your business as well.
Yeah, Seth, thank you very much. Excellent. And we'll talk to you again soon. And the rest of the crew at Institute for Preparing Heirs, we've got a very methodical array of deliverables coming up in the next number of weeks. So Karen Weisgerber, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, and we'll have you back soon.
Great to talk with you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Always On with Duncan MacPherson, where our objective is to enable professionals to always be working on their business and on themselves. Want to learn more about Duncan and his team? Visit ParetoSystems.com. Don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and/or guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Pareto Systems. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.